Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast, a space where we embrace our marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and welcome back to episode 79 of this podcast. I can't believe we're almost at 80 episodes. That is crazy. And welcome. I feel like I haven't talked to you guys in a really long time. I'm like, I need to do an episode by myself at this point because I've had so many amazing guests, but miss this interaction and just sharing with you guys. And if you have enjoyed these past few weeks, and no matter what season of life you're in, if you're single, dating, or married, I hope you got something out of it. And if you have loved it and have enjoyed it, please leave a review. Let me know what your thoughts are. I've gotten some feedback on social media, and thank you for those that have shared it, because it's also something that I have learned from these past few weeks, to be honest, and just really grateful for each and every one of you. A few updates about life, because I feel like I haven't talked to you guys, is that I have been adjusting to the work from home life balance between like the podcast and like social media, working on a few things that I'm excited to share with you guys soon. And also joined a salsa class, and I've been doing that for a few weeks, and it's amazing. Like, I don't know why I didn't do that before. I had taken one salsa class before a long time ago, and I've always like been like, I would love to do that again, but it's something that is just fun, and just like I feel like so disconnected when I'm there, and everybody's super nice and it's not awkward. Like, I thought it was going to be awkward. Like, maybe my idea of it was that everyone's going to be like pointing you out, but it's like people teach you as you go, and it's just like a fun atmosphere, and it's been honestly such a good like disconnect and good for my mental health, to be honest. And then I'm still doing like the weightlifting, which has gone well, and just some adjustments with the aunt life and some changes coming as well. And so it's just been like, I feel like this month has flown by. Like, honestly, I'm like, where did the time go? But also I feel like so many things are changing, and I'm just really grateful for it. Like, I'm embracing the change. That's what I said from the beginning of the year. Like, this is a year of a change and adjustment, and I'm going with it. I've also had an opportunity to be like guest on podcast and radio, and I was able to talk at an event, like at a women's event about 2 weeks ago. And I was super honored and like to be asked and to be a part of it. Cause I feel like it was like, I feel like since this year started, it was like God telling me like, now it's time. Like, it's, like when people say like when preparation meets like the opportunity, it's like, that's kind of what it's been. I feel like the past 2 years has been like preparation behind closed doors, like, within myself, like healing from things and working through things. And then now, like, it's like God, I feel like gave me a green light, like, okay, now it's time, like, talk about it. Like, work, you're like, kind of like I'm ready, even though I don't feel like I'm ready, but it's like, I feel like I've done some behind the scenes work, and it's not about being perfect either. And I feel like I used to think that too, even starting this whole podcast. It was like, but like, I still struggle with stuff. Like, I still have like my low days. Like, I still have like my imperfect days. But then it was like, but that's also what I want to show, that it's like, I don't have it all figured out, and I'm working through things. I don't have this perfect life and this like, because we see so much of that on social media, and I don't want to be just like another, highlight reel. Like, that's why I feel like in this podcast, I'm able to share those other things. And if you just follow me on Instagram versus you follow me on Instagram, but you also listen to my podcast, you have like a bigger scope of like what's going on and like the realness versus just a picture, or just like a reel of something. So, I really hope like when you listen to an episode or you see something of mine, you feel like encouraged, uplifted, like that you feel like seen and heard, and knowing that you're not alone in this. And, because I'm still going through stuff too, even if I'm speaking on the other side of this mic. And so I spoke at this event, which was crazy, like how it all worked out. But even preparing for this event, it was like God bringing certain things that I had to still like work through, like some raw feelings about stuff in my past, and things that just like, like even preparing for it, it was like having anxiety, and like I was having insomnia, like I couldn't sleep like for multiple nights. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, it just felt like all these things were happening up until the day. But I know it was like I needed to talk about it. And I'm so glad that I did, because God used, so I know a few women that came up to me and told me about their story and told me about what they were going through. And so I wanted to share what I spoke about on that day, here with you guys. And kind of doing it more like, because I like spoke the whole time, but of course there was an audience this time, which is a different setup, because usually I'm like in my room recording by myself, but this time it was like people were like looking at me, and I'm like, okay, like in the moment when I first went up there, it was like smooth until I actually like had to talk, and I was like, wait, what like what am I saying, like, and then I looked at my notes, I'm like, okay, like continuing. And something else I know about that day, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm like pretty blind, like I have horrible eyesight, and it just gets worse every single year. And so I had gotten new glasses like probably 2 weeks ago, and they gave me these contacts to start doing, because I would like to start wearing contacts. But I have been slacking, and I waited until like 2 to 3 days before the event to try them out, and they were drying out my eyes. So your girl, literally on my computer, I just put the font like 16 size font. And that's how I was able to see, because I was like, I'm not about to wear my glasses up there. So, anyways, that's just a side note. I would just talk about what I spoke about here on that day. And I hope that it helps and encourages someone and just makes someone feel like they are not alone. And you just get to see like the rawness of things that I haven't fully talked about on this podcast. But sharing it in person was so scary and so like the emotions. But at the end of the day, I am so grateful I did. And, I know that one of you guys are going to share your story soon as well. And that's what I hope, that every time you listen to a story, even on this podcast, that that it's like that can be you too. And you have a story to tell. So for those that don't know, I started Beauty Marks podcast in 2020, and it was all about starting, talking about faith and mental health, personal growth, and how people have overcome their obstacles. But Beauty Marks was really centered around the verse of Isaiah 61:3, where God turns all things for good, where he turns ashes to beauty, and he turns mourning to joy, and he helps us and transforms things for our good. So something that could have destroyed you, that could have broke you, but it just left a mark. And you have it there as a mark to know that you have overcome something, that it's beautiful because it's your story. Are any of you guys planners? There are some people here that probably are go with the flow kind of person. Well, for me, since I was young, I had my life planned out. Like I had this like Pinterest IG board that was just so perfect. And I was like, this is what my life is going to look like. Well, for those that are planners, I just want you to know something, that life does not go as planned. So sorry to burst your bubble. A little backstory about me is that I grew up in church. So my parents were people that always imparted their faith into us. And I'm super grateful for that. But we were at church literally like 5 days a week. We were Pentecostal I did the whole like missionettes with the purity rings, and did all these things. But we also did like Sunday devotional together, and it was great. I know that even though I've shared some things about my childhood, like I'm so grateful for that they instilled in us from a young age. And in school, I was always someone that excelled in a lot of things that I did. So I was always like a goody good, like A+ student, honor roll. Like that was something that was like my my who I was. And I felt though the pressure to be perfect since like a very young age. And I felt like it was like performance. Like, so, I was excelling, I was doing good, I had all these things. And even my friends, even out throughout middle school and high school, it was like, oh, Liz is the angel. Like, oh, Liz is like the one that always follows rules. Like breaking rules for me was like, I hated it like to the core. Like even with my older sister that she would like break rules and stuff, I would always like freak out and be like, Steph, I don't want you to get in trouble. Like, if you just like come back on time, like that was me, like my whole life. And, but that was something that again was something that was portrayed about me. But my internal struggle, especially when I was in middle school, that no one knew about, was that I struggled with disordered eating, which was that I was chubby when I was young. And like usually when you're in middle school, I feel like people in middle school are so mean and like you don't realize it until after, but most of us got our insecurities from like middle school times or elementary school. And I remember for me it was about my weight. It was about like, girl, like your butt is big, like always like calling me out on my body. And like for some of you guys, it's like maybe it was your nose, like someone told you like you have a big nose, and then you're like, oh wow, I do have a big nose. Same thing with my teeth. That was always something too. Like people would say things about like my vampire teeth. And so I was started being insecure about my teeth. And I started getting an obsession about like losing weight. And so I did, like I stopped eating and I lost weight and nobody knew how I lost it, but everyone was just like praising me about this weight loss. And that's when I started getting noticed by boys. And so I started dating in middle school and I don't know who let me, but my parents didn't know. And my first boyfriend was this guy that we were probably dating like for 6 months. I don't even know if to count this because we were so young, but I remember we were dating and he was like not a good boy in the school. And I was like the honor roll. And a few months into our relationship, I found out that he had gone to in Oklahoma, we had something called like the Rama lights, and he had gone with another girl to go see the lights and he kissed her. And so I found out through MySpace. I found out because someone wrote me and told me of what they saw. And so my little heart was so broken. And I'm like, ooh, like I cannot believe that this happened to me. That was actually like my first real like heartbreak. And I was just looking for validation for boys to tell me that I'm enough, that I'm loved, that I'm seen, because I had that insecurity that made me feel like I wasn't. I don't have the best record after that. I kept dating some very unhealthy men and some, I know that there's part of it that it's like you're young, but also there's like unhealthy patterns that are created when you're young. And I dated this guy in high school for like 3 years on and off. And 2 days before our prom, I found out that he cheated on me with a freshman. So it was like our senior prom. It was a freshman that sat behind me in one of my classes. And that again, like triggered that, like, you're not enough. And he had cheated on me throughout multiple times throughout. And I had started creating a cycle of on and off relationships. And that hit that wound. And after high school, I really wanted to live my life like to the Lord again, because not that I had gone away, but I was just kind of like trying to fit in, like trying to do. And I was like, you know what? No, like I'm done. Like I really want to like have like Christian friendships and all of that. And so I started going to church and being involved, and I met some amazing Christian friends. And I also met my boyfriend at the time. And, it was like my first like church boyfriend. And I thought it was perfect, thought we would get married very early on. And, but as time went on, things changed and the dynamic shifted. And we ended up breaking up probably like 2.5 years in to the relationship. And this created an on and off cycle that was toxic over years of like emotional abuse and emotional cheating and just on and off chipping away at my self-esteem and feeling guilty for what I was doing because I didn't I feel like I was being a fraud of the life that I was trying to portray versus what was really going on in the relationship. And so for my non-married women here that are listening to this podcast, I just want to remind you to not fall in love with potential. Look at the fruits. Jesus said, "You will know them by their fruits." If their words and actions don't align with what the word of God says, that is not love. Like, love does not look like pain over and over for many years. And I felt like that was something that I couldn't show from the outside. So from the outside, it looked like, oh, you're in a relationship, you've been in a relationship for a long time, but people didn't know the ins and outs of that relationship. And this person was my everything. Like, I'm talking about, like, I felt like I could not live without this person. There was some codependency issues there, which I've talked about in previous episodes. And it created a trauma cycle of just on and off, and like that longing and like that need to be loved and seen. But this person was like reminding me that I wasn't loved and I wasn't seen and I wasn't good enough. And something that I felt like was a gift from God had become my God. Like, this person was my life. Like, I could not imagine my life without them. And my family ended up being concerned about our relationship, and some things, from the outside, people were like, oh, like, what's going on with some close friends that I would tell. But then also I didn't want to tell too much because a lot of people knew of who we were. And I've never been someone to talk bad about someone in a public space. Like, I'm very selective with who I tell stuff to, because I know that people sometimes they just want to know for tea. It's not because they care about how your heart is. They just want to know because they just want to know the latest scoop on your relationship. And so there was a part of me that I just wouldn't let people into those areas. You see, what I didn't tell you about my story is that I was sexually abused at 4 years old, and I didn't deal with that trauma until my early 20s. So all those years I had felt not heard, not seen, not protected. Like, a part of me was unexplained, but my unhealed trauma was coming out in so many other ways, by people pleasing, self-betrayal, low self-esteem, trying for others to tell me who I was. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I was willing to do whatever for love. And I just didn't want to be abandoned. I didn't want to be alone. I had played a part for so many years until I felt like I was so broken on the inside that it didn't make sense. Because I went to church, I felt like I was doing all the Christian 101 things. And, from the outside, you would say that, like, she's doing good. Like, she's in a relationship, she's traveling, she has her job, she's in school, she graduated school, she's, living a normal life, and, all smiles on Instagram and on social media. But on the inside, that wasn't the case. Sometimes we hide behind our role or our title. So what are things that you are hiding behind? Is it your looks, your makeup, your hair that you get done, your nails? You're always like on top of your fashion, and you feel like that's how you get affirmation. And maybe it's the gym and the body that you have. Maybe it's the job title that you have and the role that you have. And you like only let people see that part of you. And there's no other way that they can get in. They don't know the other struggles that you have. Maybe it's the relationship and the family that you portray to have, but that's not really what it is. Or a lifestyle that you have, that you perceive to have for others, but that's truly not what it is. We invest so much time on the external things about us and all these things and jobs and titles, but that's only what people see. They might not know that you struggle with depression, anxiety, resentment, that you struggle with suicidal thoughts, and that your heart is broken and you're maybe doing self-harm. I remember in a therapist session, my therapist asked, I know you like fashion and beauty and you like dressing up and everything, but what if what you looked on the outside, so all that you had going on internally, was what was displayed on the outside? What would that look like? Imagine if what you were wearing on the outside was what was on the inside, and actually people got to see all the scars, the pain, the hurt, not a highlight reel, like the real you. We don't take much time to focus and work on ourselves, but invest so much time on our outward appearance. Yet forget that beauty is fleeting, that all the external things are so fleeting. And we focus so much on that. The more pressure that we have to live a life and a facade for others, that we keep bottling it up, and it gets heavy. It gets heavy trying to be perfect and have it all together and put this face, and having to deal with internal things that you don't want to deal with, but you're using other things on the outside to cover what's going on in the inside. I'll be the first one to say that even speaking behind this mic, I don't have it all together. I've had two moments in my life that I really thought maybe if I wasn't here anymore, life would be better. I was in 2017 and in 2019 to 2020 that I felt like my perfect plan was falling apart. My ex was telling me he didn't even know if he believed in marriage, constantly telling me I'm too much, needed space, didn't feel the same about me. Things were different. I felt like things were unfolding and just things were just like not going what I planned. I had moved out of my house. And this is even though I was in an on and off relationship, like I really thought I was going to marry this man. And even when I moved out of my house, as we prolonged our relationship, I was like, oh, like after this, I'm going to go move in or, start my life with this person. Like that's what was my plan, like either like marriage or something after this. But I felt like the closer it got to that, and my friends were getting around me married, and people would be like, you're next, you're next. And they didn't know what was happening in my relationship. They didn't know that that person was not going to propose to me. Like that person didn't feel that way about me and was not treating me in that way. That was nowhere in sight for me. And I felt like, what is wrong with me? I would cry countless nights and be like, God, like, I know you love me, but if this is love, like, I don't want it. Like, I know love shouldn't feel like this. And I remember having like anxiety attacks, panic attacks after we would fight and after things would go down or we would break up. And I just felt like my world was ending. And I just feel like, why is this not working out for me? Like, I've tried this for so many times, and I feel like everyone's telling me that I won't ever have that. I won't ever be loved. Like I'm not enough. Like there's always someone better than me. There's always someone prettier than me. I'm always going to be too much, and I'm the one that's toxic in all of this. I had to go back home to live with my parents, and I had like a rash spread all over my body. I was getting migraines. I passed out twice in public, blacking out. Like my energy was low, and I was just not struggling very, very much because there were so many things happening all at once in that year. And I felt like I didn't know what was happening, but I also knew that like it was just like stress and just all these things. Like I was sad. And so I went to the doctor to figure out, like with my blood work, to try to figure out what was going on. And the doctor started asking me questions to figure out if I was depressed or not. And he was like, do you feel like a failure to like your family? And I was like, yeah. And my younger sister was there with me. And she didn't know that I was going through that. And from the outside at that time, I was going to events for my work. I was traveling, like, again, putting a facade on for other people to know and to seem like if I had it all going well. And I realized at the moment where I was, that all the things that had happened had affected me for so many years, like things that I hadn't dealt with. Christians go through depression, and sometimes you do need medication, and that is so real. And sometimes God uses doctors and medicine to help you. You can still have Jesus and experience it. And I feel like my counselor has been like, Jesus has been able to use her to speak to me and to help me through trauma and healing and dealing with things that I never saw, like giving me another perspective. Maybe you have lost something or feel hopeless. You're carrying it and it's getting heavy. You feel like you have to put on a mask and a face every single day, but you feel it in your body. With the sleepless nights, you have anxiety. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe there's some trauma in your body that you feel like because you haven't dealt with issues, maybe there's things that you haven't told anybody, but you're holding on this facade. Can I tell you that it does get heavy, and I know how that feels? A few weeks ago, Chesley Christ committed suicide. She was a Miss USA 2019 TV host, lawyer. She worked for TMZ, like dream job, like lived this life that it's like she had it all. She was beautiful, and everyone around her was so surprised when that happened. And all the messages of what people were posting about her was like, wow, she's so beautiful. Like she seemed so happy. She was always so encouraging, always smiling. But no one knew what was really happening internally. On the day that she committed suicide, she wrote on pretty much a suicide note to the world. And she posted a picture of herself and she said, "May this day bring you rest and peace." So she was talking to herself, like, may this day bring me rest and peace. I want to remind someone today that Jesus is the only one that can bring you rest and peace for your soul. What we are looking for can only be found in the one who created us. I can't say that I know what she was experiencing fully to get to that point, but I know that it got heavy. In my time that I had dealt with depression, and I had put so many deadlines on myself. I had put so much pressure on myself to hold it all together. God had to help me to release that control to Him. He created us and He has the best agenda for us. Sometimes that requires some reroutes and U-turns, but God leads us to where we are supposed to be. That breakup that I've experienced and the healing journey has been one of the hardest things that I've had to walk through, that I had fought so long to not want to let go. Like, no lie, like 15 times back and forth, where I finally had to let it go. Like, it was too painful to hold on to. I felt like until I was able to let go my plan and my life and be completely vulnerable and be honest with God and put down that mask of things that I was trying to portray, I felt like God reached out into that dark hole that I was in and pulled me out. And God saw me. God loved me. I was enough. I was always enough. I didn't have to perform or put on a face anymore. Because you don't have to hide those parts of yourself with God. When I let God start restoring and putting those pieces back together, He started mapping out my new life and the perfect plan that He had for me. Now that I look back, my relationship with my family got stronger in the past few years. I made deeper relationships with my close friends that I had not had that close of a connection with. I started Beauty Marks podcast, sharing bits and pieces of my story that helped women to heal, to know God, and to feel like they aren't alone. Because I felt like, wow, I know in that moment that I was going through that, I always thought that I was alone. But once I got out of it, I'm like, wow, no, I know that there's women that need to hear this and need to be encouraged and need to be reminded that they can get through the darkest lows. to get to where I am today has been such a journey. And even the stuff that I do share, and people sometimes ask me, like, wow, like you're so vulnerable. How do you do that? Like, is it hard? Like, how much is too much to share? And even the stuff that I have shared, there's so much more that you guys don't know. Like, and even that persona, I definitely now I'm super aware to try to not have my life look like if I have it all together, because I talk about things, but there's still things that I'm working through. But when I started unveiling those areas, God started to heal and work in. And it was so painful to let go of old patterns, ways of thinking, dealing with my unhealed trauma from childhood, and then realizing where I lost my no and where I lost my boundaries and where I felt like I needed affirmation, what happened and what led to that, and having to forgive and go through the healing process. There are many ways of working through your healing, but I feel like the first thing is letting God into those areas, being honest with God about how you feel and where you're at right now, being honest and not having to put up a front, because you don't have to do that with him. You don't have to put on a face or a filter with God. He loves the most raw version of you, the version of you that if you showed someone else, you think that they won't love you. God is like, nah, I made you. I love you. I love that part. All those thoughts, all of that, like that's what I want. And I feel like until I started being real with how I felt, where I was at, then I was able to let God in, because God's a gentleman and he's not going to force his way into your life. He's like, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting. And letting God in those areas is the first thing. And then you let safe people in. Am I telling you that you have to tell your story to everybody and let everybody in and have a breakdown at work every day? No, that's not what I'm saying here. I just mean that finding a safe space of community and letting safe people in to look behind the curtain and not have to put on this facade is so important. And being real with yourself. Another thing, therapy. I talk about therapy a lot because it is so life-changing and God can use it, and finding a good therapist. And every time that you share your story and what you have gone through, sometimes we downplay our story because we're like, what have I even gone through? Like, oh, we're just being victims. No, you have a story of overcoming, and someone needs to hear it, because that is what will unlock someone else's freedom. And what we bring to the light, the enemy has no foothold over. All the things about my childhood, that this is the first time that I talk about it, that is something that held such weight for so many years. And now being able to talk about it, it's like the enemy doesn't have any hold over it. My relationships, I am putting it out there because I know God has redeemed it and God has helped me through it. We have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Our testimony is so powerful. And 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 5, verse 4 says, God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. So as God comforts us and helps us, usually we do the same for other people, because that's the heart that he gives us. And he helps us to do that, to help others. Your story matters and it's not over. I remember feeling so ashamed of my story from being sexually abused as a child. So bringing that baggage already into the relationships that I was in already felt like I was being, like I had a stain. Like I was a problem already, because nobody understood that. Like how are you going to explain to someone that has never experienced that? And then toxic relationships constantly, and then my mental health issues, and dealing with things that I was too ashamed to share about and people didn't understand. And then feeling like in the relationship area, no one struggled with that. and everybody seemed to have their person. And, I felt like it was just so hard to deal with always constantly those internal voices of like, I'm not enough, I'm not loved. And then getting affirmation that I felt like people were reminding me that I wasn't. And that's just part of my story. I realized that those are the marks that God has redeemed and he has healed and he's working through, and he's able now. And now I'm able to share that with others. God uses it all. He works all things for good. He uses it to strengthen our faith in him and comfort others. I now have so much compassion for women in toxic relationships, on and off relationships, being single in your mid-20s. I have compassion for someone that has been abused as a child, that hasn't dealt with that has sometimes PTSD of stuff. I can give someone hope of what Jesus has done through my life. Our direct pain will be the heart of our purpose. God will use our pain to direct us to those we can help heal through our story. If you find yourself feeling like that raw, low version of what I shared, of where I was, I just want to remind you to let people in, be vulnerable with safe people, and God, most importantly, and give your perfect plan over to God, because I promise you that his is so much better than yours. Have compassion with yourself in this journey of healing and working through some things and understanding your story, and take intentional action towards your healing. Because at the end of the day, people cannot help you if you do not let them. And if you do not tell them, there's people that want to help, that want to know, that genuinely are there for you. And sometimes God places those people around us, and then we cry out and say we feel alone, and God's like, but I sent you her. Like, this girl texted you, and that's like other people telling you, like, I'm here, I see you, but you have to be willing to let them in. You see, I talk about this so much because I really believe that when you are healthy on the inside, like internally in your heart, then it radiates to the outside. This world tells you that you glow up based on how you look and your weight and your scale and how your body come back and how much money you make and all these things. But God really cares about the inside of us. To be healthy leaders, to be healthy parents, to be healthy partners, to be healthy people in our community, it starts with us. And then you can live in the fullness of who God made you to be when you start dealing with those other things that maybe you have been hiding. So ask yourself, is there something that I'm hiding behind? Are there marks or wounds that need healing? Is there areas that I have to expose in order to work through and become who God made me to be? So if this message spoke to you, I just want to end this podcast with a prayer. Father God, I just pray for anyone listening that feels like they have some areas that they need to heal, that you may just give them the peace that they need, the joy, Father God, that makes no sense. May you show them the areas that they need to give over to you, because you have the perfect plan for their life and you work all things for their good. I ask you, Father God, that you may bring them into community to help them see themselves the way that you see them. I just thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I hope that you know that you are not alone and that you are loved. And thank you for listening to this episode. It was definitely a vulnerable one, and it was emotional after to share it and be like, wow, like God really did it. Like God has done it. And I know that he's not done with my story. It is just like part of it. And this is just like a chapter of my story, but I'm so glad to be able to help those that have been through similar things. And maybe you don't relate to my story, and maybe you haven't experienced what I have experienced, and that's okay, because there's someone else that you can relate to and that can help by them sharing their story. And then maybe there's things of your story that you can share that help others as well. But we are more alike than what we think we are. We've all experienced things, and we've all have worked through areas, and at the end of the day, like, we just see how we can overcome by God's help and by having those important support people around us as well. So make sure to subscribe to this podcast, share it with a friend if you enjoyed this episode or it spoke to you. You can tag me at Elizabeth Sabby, and you can follow me at Elizabeth Sabby for more content. And I will see you guys next Monday. Have a great week.